Joining us now and running for mayor in New York City, the one and the only, he's back, Curtis Sliwa. Curtis, man, we got to do something here, man. When you come in from out of town, look, I got to Penn Station, Curtis, Sunday night, midnight, right? Normally, you wait for a cab in the cab line for 20 or 30 minutes. This time, I had to wait 20 or 30 minutes because there's nobody on the street. The streets are empty. It's like a ghost town. What's going on, Curtis?
Well, in fact, you have more activity in downtown Buffalo, the second largest city in New York State, than you have in downtown New York City. And that speaks volumes. We are on the brink of the fiscal apocalypse in New York City because of Governor Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo, King Cuomo II, and the other Italian stallion, Comrade Bill de Blasio. He's the part-time mayor. They have brought us to the brink of fiscal collapse, and they seem to be very sadistic in the way they're doing things. They're not allowing entrepreneurs to open up, even though our coronavirus rate is the lowest it's ever been, even though our death rate is almost non-existent from coronavirus, and yet they continue to keep the pressure on. Every day, John, as I walk out of my apartment, I see convoys, not individual trucks, convoys of moving trucks as they are, look, my neighbors, they're taking my neighbors away, many of them down your way to Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Tennessee, Texas, but many of them to places like New Hampshire, Connecticut, other areas of New York State. They're sort of hedging their bet, but a lot of people are just giving up on New York City lock, stock, and barrel and moving out.
I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. People just leaving, but, you know, you still can't go to a restaurant and sit inside. You can only sit outside, so you can't do that. I look out the window. These office buildings are empty. Nobody's coming to work. I don't know how these people are paying the rent, so I don't know what the deal is with that. And then de Blasio and the city council defunded the cops $1 billion, so I'm just waiting for that shoe to drop when the cuts finally are implemented. But who pays for this city? Who pays the bills? When is it? I mean, isn't it just going to collapse?
Well, we want you, the taxpayers in the rest of the country, to bail us out. And I'm telling you all right now, as a New Yorker, cut my veins and arteries, I bleed the 5 boroughs of New York City. That would be the absolute biggest mistake, to bail out New York State, bail out New York City. Many of these fiscal problems occurred long before the lockdown. So we were mired in debt. And as you know, unlike the federal government, a state government or a city government must balance the books, must have a balanced budget. So if all of a sudden Trump would arrive to the rescue and bail out New York State and New York City, all it's going to do is just delay what we have to do, which is improve, not move. We got to buckle down. And we have to learn to do more with less. Because there's another wave you haven't described yet, John. AOC, all out crazy, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her Democrat Socialists of America minions have just issued a manifesto of how they're going to take over New York City from the bottom up. They want to take $3 billion from the New York City Police Department budget. $3 billion. They want to strip all public safety. They want to close the jails. So you're talking about Mad Max. Go back to the Mel Gibson classics. You're talking about Mad Max, New York City, or pretty much what Detroit was like 20 years ago when the downtown area was like a ghost town and people were leaving lock, stock, and barrel. I fear we're moving in that direction, so that's why we got to put the brakes on. We've got to convince people, no. You can't leave now. We got to fight for what we know is right, because this is exactly what the AOCs of the world want. They want all the good, law-abiding, God-fearing people to leave New York City so that whoever remains will be loyal to them, or they can bully them into submission. This way their agenda gets put into place.
It's incredible. Curtis, you have been active. You said this. You bleed New York City. You've been active in New York City forever with your guardian angels. I mean, you've been an iconic figure. You've been on the radio, WABC. Everybody knows you. Let's talk about this mayor's race. I mean, after people have seen the chaos in the streets, the looting, the mobs, the crime is up here. I don't know, the last time I read 300 or 400% murders up, all kinds of crime is up. Cops are being asked to stand down. Police are being disrespected. With all of this going on, are the people of the city of New York finally going to wake up, who's ever still remains here, and say, maybe these Democratic left-wing liberal mayors like de Blasio, maybe this isn't the way to go? Is there ever going to be an awakening here, kind of like there was with Giuliani in 91?
Well,
I'm sorry,
91. Right. The
93.
difference is the city has changed measurably, the demographics. We've had the greatest migration of whites into an urban area in the history of America in a brief amount of time. But these are the hipsters and millennials. So these are people who already lean extremely left. They are the vanguard for AOC. They have been in the ranks of Black Lives Matter, even though most of them are white. So you go out and you must take the vote from the street. They run the streets now. When they go up and down the blocks, and they're not always rioting and looting, but when they have just like a normal demonstration, they'll scream at the top of their lungs, with or without masks on, whose streets are streets? Whose streets are streets? And nobody challenges them, not even the police, because they've been told to stand down. If you're going to win an election, you got to go out there and stop the intimidation. You got to get the good people to leave their apartments, leave their homes, and come out in sizable numbers. Because if not, voters will be intimidated. This is old-fashioned intimidation, and it can take place whether there continues to be mail-in ballots, which, as you know, the Democrats want, or we go back to the traditional way of casting our vote in a polling location. But the battle has to be won in the streets. Unfortunately, Republicans always seem that they can win an election in New York City in the suites by getting bankrolled, wine-dined, and pocket-lined by the heavy hitters. It's not going to work in New York City any longer. You've got to go out into the outer boroughs, not Manhattan. You've got to win the hearts, minds, and souls of the people in the streets. If you don't, you're only going to get 30% of the vote and then try to do it all over again 4 years from then.
You're running for mayor. Just walk us through that, because I'm going to be covering your campaign for mayor. I don't care what the outcome is. I think that your voice has to be heard. People have to hear what you're saying. And I think, Curtis, to be quite frank with you, I think you're going to do demonstrably better in this mayor's contest than anybody can imagine. I really do. You're going to get outspent. You're going to get bloodied. But look, you've been fighting the underdog battle, Curtis, your whole life. Like, there's nothing different. Walk us through your campaign. Are you going to run as a Republican and get the nomination there? What happens? Just give us a little taste of it. I know it isn't until November 21, but give us a little inkling.
Well, this is from a bettor's point of view, let me lay the odds out on the table. I'm running as a Republican. There is an 8-to-1 differential in party registration. That means there are 8 Democrats for every 1 Republican. The larger group, though, that is rising, like yeast that you put into bread, the number of independents, many of the hipsters and millennials in their generation are not registering with either party. They're not party apparatchiks. You know, in fact, they're into this rebellious thing, so that if their parents were Democrats, they're not going to be Democrats. If their parents were Republicans, they're not going to be Republicans. It's all part of this rebellious phase. They're independents. Their hearts, minds, and souls can be won. So if you put together a coalition of Republicans and independents, but then you have to go into communities that a lot of times Republicans either fear to go into or they don't think they'll have many results. The public housing projects where so many of our residents live. I've lived in the public housing projects. People know me in the public housing projects. In the inner city, you've got to fight for every black vote, every Hispanic vote. You've got to go into the gay and lesbian community, which many Republicans just decide we're not going to go in there because nobody's going to vote for us. Why do you suddenly sacrifice such a large portion of the voting public and basically turn them into instant Democrats? That's foolish. If you're going to go to war politically for the soul of the city, you have to take your message to every man, woman, and child. The advantage is now very few people are watching TV, and if they are watching TV, you know, it's like the focus of a TC fly. It's ephemeral. Maybe they'll look 30 seconds at a political ad. Everything now is social networking. Everything is to go directly to the voter. In my case, face-to-face, and also social networking. I think that's the key to victory. And reminding people that I was here when many of them were not born. I was fighting for the soul of the city. It's come back before, and I can do it again.
Curtis Sliwa with us, radio talk show personality, WABC New York iconic figure, founder, head of Guardian Angels, been protecting New Yorkers from thugs for years with his organization. He's been bloodied up, beat up many times, now running for mayor. That'll be decided 2021. You know, you talk about the LGBTQ vote or the gay vote. Poll out the other day, Trump getting 45% right now, the gay male vote. What do you think of that, Curtis?
I can see that being true. Because remember, you have equity, right? You have a piece of property. You have a business. You see what's transpiring. Forget your gender. Forget your sexuality. Immediately, you see all of that is threatened, and you begin to realize, hey, wait a second. I can't just go lockstep with a message from the far left or the Democratic Party because they don't want to protect my property rights. They don't want to protect what I've worked so hard for. They don't want to protect what I've invested for maybe 20, 30, 40 years of my life. So I can easily see that going in that direction. It's like today. We see that 87% of New York eateries can't pay their rent in New York City. Most of those bars and restaurants, no matter who owns them, straights, gays, are going to end up closing. In fact, John, in the middle of the campaign, if you actually visit me, maybe the only place we'll be able to stop and dine is to have a dirty water hot dog at a vendor's cart if he hasn't gone out of business. That's how dire things are becoming.
Incredible. Just so everybody knows, the 2021 New York City mayoral election, that's November 21. Incumbent Mayor de Blasio, worst mayor in probably the history of America, of all cities anywhere, is unable to run for a third term due to term limits that were recently instated. There was a time when you could run for 3 terms. Now the city stopped that, so you got 2 terms. So de Blasio's out. So basically, in the New York City ballot, when I lived here, there were a bunch of different lines. You had the Republican line, Democratic line, Conservative line, and Liberal line. Is it still that way, Curtis? Is that still the way it works?
There are other independent lines, but really it all comes down to the first 2. A, the Democratic line, B, the Republican line. Unfortunately, most people, it's like either one or the other, and this is a strongly Democratic town. You have to change the way people think, and in fact, you have to get them to come out and vote in a mayoral election. Now, clearly, they're going to come out and vote in droves in this presidential election of 2020. And you would think everything you added to the recipe of disaster that New York City is facing, where it's become Dante's Inferno, you would think that would cause voters to scrape the barnacles off their backside, get their rear end gear, and vote, whether it's a mail-in ballot or they go to their polling location. I got to tell you, these last few mayoral campaigns have been so apathetic and indifferent. Only 25% of the registered voters have shown up in the general election. Only 25%. For me to win, I got to get at least 50% or more of them to decide that voting to save the city is important. That's a long haul. I may get a double hernia in the process. Let me tell you something.
Well,
and by the way, John, if we do have that dirty water hot dog, when the hot dog vendor is the only one available who can sell food outside of Penn Station when you come in, according to the New York City campaign finance laws, you cannot buy me that hot dog like you could for elected officials in Virginia, or I am subject to being removed from the ballot. You can't buy me a dirty water hot dog.
Well, when I got out of Penn Station Sunday night, it was about 12:30 from Amtrak. When I got out there and I couldn't get a cab, but there was one thing that was open. And that was, I think it was on 8th Avenue. When you get out of Penn Station there, I went up 8th. I figured I'd have a better shot there. So I go up 8th Avenue to go to that cab stand. The only person there, the only thing there, and there's all these lights he's got a generator going, is there's a hot dog stand at 12:30 at night. And I'm like thinking to myself, so I actually went over there and I got a diet soda from the guy. Of course, I was worried that Bloomberg had a camera looking over my shoulder. I can't have that in New York City. But I got Diet Coke from the guy at 12:30, and a water to take back with me in the taxi. But there's nobody on the street but this hot dog vendor at 12:30. What is up with that?
No, it's like Dawn of the Dead. You do see some people roaming around like zombies in Dawn of the Dead. They're the dope fiends. They're looking to shoot up. They're the emotionally disturbed persons who should be in psychiatric facilities. Thank you, Cuomo and de Blasio, for pouring them into the streets. And then there are hundreds and hundreds of homeless people. Now, imagine, John, they have contracted 130 hotels that obviously will empty after the lockdown. And they have shoved homeless and emotionally disturbed people into their hotels all throughout New York City. And it's not a zero-tolerance shelter any longer. So that means, yes, when you come in, you have to be in for curfew at 10 in order to get your bed. You get wanded. You go through a metal detector to make sure you don't have weapons. But if you happen to have a shooting kit, if you happen to have a nickel and dime bag of heroin, if you happen to have K2, if you happen to have a bottle, a big boy, a tall boy, they don't take it from you. So at taxpayers' expense, if you're an alcoholic, we feed your addiction. If you're a drug addict, we feed your addiction. And the cycle of homelessness and the emotionally disturbed who are not being cared for just continues to grow and grow. Streets. Who want to be out in the streets when you're like Bambi in the middle of hunting season with a orange fluorescent vest on, and the hunters have their guns trained down you?
Curtis Sliwa says New York City is a cross between Dante's Inferno and Dawn of the Dead. Curtis, I love your mayor's. I'm going to be following your mayor's camp. I'm going to come up here a lot when this thing goes. So you're ready, just to be sure. I just want to get this straight. So you're running. You're trying to get the Republican nomination, right? Like Giuliani and Bloomberg did. Is that the goal?
Yeah, they'd be crazy not to have me as their candidate.
So you're going to get.
So
you're going to get the conservative line. You're going to get the Republican line. The Democrats are going to have a fight over who's more whacked, who's more of a whack job to get there. I don't know if you're in New York. I don't know how you could vote for anybody but Curtis Sliwa. Your entire city is burning. It's going to hell in a hip. It's not going to exist. Curtis, thanks for being with us.